to New Orleans, you ought to go see the Mardi Gras. If you go to New Orleans, you ought to go see the Mardi Gras.
Happy Mardi Gras, and welcome to another episode of Tales from the Parade Route. Tonight we are joined by a longtime friend of mine who he wrote a very special story about a very special person to the world of Mardi Gras. Tonight we have Mr. Greg Fischer here, who's going to talk a little bit about his book, The Mayor of Mardi Gras. So, welcome, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
So, for starters, I do want to, wish my condolences to you and your family on Mackie's passing. While it's a little late, he's definitely missed. I know that several people that I know that were mutual friends of his through different walks of life always spoke nothing but wonderful things about him. And when I got the chance to read your book, while I didn't know him personally, I now feel like I grew up with the guy. You get really in depth into some stories with him. So I guess the first question would be, tell us a little bit what it was like to be related to him, and
Yeah. So Mackie was like my older brother. When I thought about this on the way in, there was like in high school, I'm 15, I'm 16, and I'm mad because I got left out of something that some guys in high school are taking part in. And I'm at home with my mom, in our apartment in Kenner, and I'm just destroyed. And Mackie calls me up, and he says, "Hey, what you doing tonight, man?" And he says, "Why don't we go have a beer?" And I really think it was more, it was electrifying to have Mackie as a cousin. He was there for me more than I knew. He always surprised me with how much he cared about me. And so so that night, he just take me out, and he always had cool car. At some point he had like an old Camaro. At some point he had like a Jeep Wrangler or whatever. And so it was just it was always electrifying to be with Mackie. Later on, when I was in college and stuff like that, I was at LSU, and Mackie was working in New Orleans, and so he would make it a point to come visit me at LSU. I have a great memory of me being 20 years old and him driving up to Tigerland and parking at my apartment and us walking to the stadium and having a good time at the football game together. Later on, when I was getting close to finishing college, my mom actually at some point moved to Harahan, and so she lived 5 houses down from Mackie, and so that was awesome, because when I would come in for a weekend or whatever from college, I didn't have to worry about what I was doing. It's like, I'm going to walk down and see what Mackie's doing tonight, and he always knew what to do. He would say, "Hey, let's go to the Maple Leaf, or the River Shack or something." And the cool thing about Harahan is that even though it's kind of tucked away, and a lot of people think of it as being away from the scene or whatever, it's like 10 minutes to Oak Street down River Road.
Oh yeah, I lived River Ridge for a while.
Yeah,
you get down there pretty quickly.
So we would call a cab, generally and go out together. But you know, Mackie introduced me to a lot of those artists uptown, to George Porter Jr. and Walter Wolfman and Joe Crown and those guys. And you know, he played guitar, and like, so I would pick up his guitar when I'd go over there and hang out with him and just kind of pluck around on it. But then he would come by and he'd start playing like what was it, man? No Woman, No Cry. You know, the Bob Marley song.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there are a few songs that I connected with Mackie on. Later on, I picked up a bass guitar and we started to jam a little bit together. And this is within the past 10 years, you know.
Yeah.
And we, you know, I was really bad. I was really, really bad. But he didn't mind, you know. He had like a studio kind of similar to this in the back of his house. And we had a bass guitar, we had mics and amps, we had a drum kit. And a neighbor that lived behind Mackie would come, would just kind of jump over the fence. And he was a really good guitar player. And we would play music most, you know, into the night and stuff like that. We did some Hank Williams Jr., like Outlaw Woman. We did Marshall Tucker Band, which I kind of demonstrate in the book a little bit. The Can't You See, you know, was one of our songs. And and we did some what is it? It's some Leonard Skinner we liked. He loved Chris Stapleton, Mackie, you know, and was just really kind of open-minded when it came to music, which was amazing. It was like I would, if I could, you know, listen to something on WWOZ. I might be getting off subject, but if I would listen to something on WWOZ and I'd come to Mackie, I'd be like, man, you know, I heard this great song by this guy named John Butte, you know, and of course Mackie knew who that was. He knew several songs by him and stuff, and he'd seen him before, and it just never failed, you know. So it was like a, you know, it was just like a big bear hug, man, like on, you know, like on lock, you know, like you have this bear hug like that you can go to anytime, you know. So my connection with Mackie was strong, you know, and I know that like I have Mackie's nephew, my cousin Austin, you know, had a strong bond with Mackie. My younger cousin Carl had a strong bond with Mackie. All of us costs that, you know, first of all, Mackie's mom and my mom are twin sisters.
Wow.
So, and my mom has a big family. There's 8 of them. So we have a lot of cousins, you know, and I think, you know, they all have a strong relationship with Mackie because of the Mardi Gras floats. You know, they always had that float den on Toledano Street, and at some point, 2 or 3 of them back there, and they were working year round on the floats, and so my cousins who were men, at some point in their life, if we lost a job or something like that, we were going to work.
You got
right. You got
a saw. You got
totally. You know, you got a hammer. We need nails on that float.
Right.
If you worked long enough, you would learn how to cotton a float. You know, which after a while, after they, you know, you probably know this, but you paint a float for years, and then that cotton gets so stiff that you can just touch it, and it just
it kind of crumbles.
Crumbles, and so you have to tear the whole layer off, and then take this big, you know, roll of cotton, this fabric, basically this beige looking fabric, and run it across the float with a staple gun and just staple it. And I never got there. I never did have that skill. So I was one of these guys who was like, look, you need to go lay in and go paint that float. There's another thing that I was good at. I was good at demolition, you know. Every now and then you would you would get to work if you were working at the float den, and there wouldn't be enough room for all the floats that are over there, you know, and so they would have a float out on the street or something like that that somebody lit on fire or something like that. You get to work, and there would just be a trailer and this kind of this frame, and you needed to take all of this crud off of this trailer with a sledgehammer or something like that. That was my expertise, like a sledgehammer demolition job.
Like I said, I've been to that den a few times, and that place is packed in like sardines. Like, I was the few times I'd ridden St. Patrick's Day, I left like the speakers and all on the float, and I was just going to pick them up at the den. Well, once those things were packed in, I mean, you ended up having to pass it over floats and drop it down. Oh man, it was a nightmare. After the first year, I learned my lesson.
That reminds me, like, I think one of the biggest skills of working as a float builder is being able to move floats around, because that is half the work. To get to a float that you need to work on, you have to move 10 other floats. It's like,
it's that Tetris game.
Yeah, it's like a game of Tetris, and you have to pull them out with the tractor, kind of one at a time, and so you got to cruise it. Sometimes just standing around, like kind of just waiting to get to that job and stuff. And that's just the nature of the beast, you know. But
yeah, I remember. I think the first time I had met Mackie was that particular day when I went over there, and it was just a group of us when I used to work at the Kmart over here, and it was the garden center basically had a float, and so we rode, and I was like, I got some speakers that did sound for bands and all, and he's like, you left your speakers on the float, and you know, some choice words like, you idiot, you know, like, you know, like, you should have known better than that. I was like, I didn't think about it, you know, like. But
so they got wet.
Oh no, they were fine, but he was just kind of making fun of the fact that I didn't realize it was going to be packed in like sardines immediately. Gotcha. I mean, like, they beat me there and had it packed in. I was like, damn, because I mean, I've been in float dens; they were all packed.
Yeah.
But that one in particular is really tight. Like you almost can't walk in between them most of the time, you know.
Yeah.
But
there's a chapter in the book that I kind of talk about that a little bit. I think it's called Van Mourning.
Yeah, there's a moment where you talk about just trying to get to a closet in the back to go grab Mackie's smokes.
Yeah.
And it, you know, you talk about how you get like 3/4 of the way there, and then you run into a pile of lumber. You go back a different way, and it's a pile of styrofoam, you know. You go back a different way.
Like a maze.
Yeah.
Totally.
so how did you get involved with Mardi Gras on that end?
Mackie?
Well, the family. I'm not sure if that was. I don't know the origin of that.
It's an old deal. So Mackie's grandfather started building floats in the 30s, and he worked for a company called the Dutchman Brothers, and the story goes, and you know, and this is coming from Mackie's dad. You know, I had to call him for this chapter. It's called 3 Mac Cantrells, because I called it 3 Mac Cantrells, and I wanted to distinguish, you know, exactly who they are individually, because so often do people say, like, I'm sorry about Uncle Mackie, or I'm sorry, you know, and it's like, no, he was my cousin, or something like that. And I'm not mad about anything, but like, but his grandfather was McKinley Cantrell, and he went by Big Mac, you know. He was really tall, like, and his son is my Uncle Mac. He's my godfather, my Paran.
Yeah. And
he just goes by Mac, and then Mackie, his son, 3rd generation, was Mackie, and so Big Mac started working for the Dutchman Brothers in the 30s, and the story goes that after working there for quite some time, he went to the owner of that company and he asked for a referral to buy some land, or to buy a house on David Drive in Metairie. and he got denied. So um, so he took it personally and quit the business, and he hooked up with another float builder at the time, this old kind of mysterious Czechoslovakian immigrant named George Blatny. And if you like, I had to dig really deep to find George Blatny because, like, my Uncle Max telling me the story, but he's not writing it down, and so I'm trying to figure out how do you spell these last names.
Yeah.
I had to dig, to find the way that the Dutchman brothers spell it, because my uncle says the Dutchman, but it's actually spelled like Deutschman,
Yeah.
and so
Like
it's
like the
Deutschland,
German, yeah.
like the Germany thing. And then sometimes in old newspaper clippings about that family, since their float building goes back probably to 19th century New Orleans, and so like some of the old clippings, they have one N on the end of their name. Some of the newspaper clippings, they have two N's. And the same for Blatny. It's like, so how do I spell Blatny? Is it Blatney? Is it Y? Is it NIE? Is it? So I'm just doing my darndest. I mean, like, I went to journalism school at LSU, and I learned how to research on the internet. And I was just, like, really digging. And finally, I found like a Facebook page for like Old Grand Isle. And apparently, off season, Mr. Blatny would hang out in Grand Isle and paint. And so I think some paintings have been destroyed because of hurricanes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But in this kind of cool old Grand Isle like page dedicated, to old art, from this era, somebody had posted a little bio of George Blatny, and it saved me, because then I got on Ancestry.com with that spelling, and I found his information. So I'm like, okay, this is how you spell it. This is where he's buried. Which I believe he's buried in St. Bernard Parish. And so I felt so good to, like, it took a few days to go through that and to dig, but once I put it all together, I didn't want it to be wrong, but so the history is there kind of in the book. So Big Max hooks up with this guy, and this guy's really talented, and I believe he at some point worked with Soulier Crassons, which is another old float builder, and they started a company. Well, I think he had his own deal going with some of these older line crews like Momus, Comus, Proteus, these guys, and we might be talking like the 40s or 50s here this time. And so Big Mac was pretty skilled at building floats and kind of just doing it. He was a workaholic, so he really kind of cared about the artistry and stuff like that. Mackie says, like, Big Mac put so much money back into the business because he wanted the floats to be just dynamite, the best, and so he wasn't playing around. It was like who he was. He wanted to represent the kind of his character there and all that stuff. So anyway, after like working with Blatny for a short period of time, Blatny makes him like a supervisor and then makes him a partner, and eventually he has enough money to break off and start his own company. And I think this happens in like the 60s, 70s. And at this point, we're talking a 40-year career so far for Mackie's grandfather, full-time as a float builder, carnival artist. And remember, like, when he worked with the Dutchman brothers, their company was such and such Dutchman and Sons float builders, So Big Mac's company, and I believe this, Big Mac passed away, by the way, when I was 19. So I was a freshman at LSU when he passed away, and I went, I remember going to his funeral, and at the wake, it was just the biggest wake I'd ever seen for anybody. there was so many flower arrangements set around his room,
Yeah.
and they were all donated by Mardi Gras crews, you know, and it was just really just a touching, like amazing thing, you know, and so when he started his company, he named it, and I really think he named it just because he still had this resentment, this old resentment. I could be wrong about this, but it seemed because he called his son McKinley J. Cantrell and Son, same as the Dutchman company was named at the time. And then when he started his first Mardi Gras crew, I think his ego was so big because he called it the Crew of Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really awesome and romantic, and at this point I'm really happy to be recording it in a way, or just telling the story, because I think it's pretty special. So, you know, I think it was difficult for, you know, my Uncle Mac. By the way, I talked to my Uncle Mac about the show tonight, and I wanted him to maybe come and kind of back me up on some of these stories, but he was like, just call me if you need me on the way in. He was meeting with the St. Patrick's Day board for
Yeah.
the parade at 7
Right.
o'clock. So I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go and do it. But yeah, so I think he had a lot to live up to as well. So like Mackie's dad, my Uncle Mac, he graduated from Rummel, and he was in the drum corps, you know, and he still plays drums, like, and so Mackie was all around, you know, and then he went into the Air Force. He got married to my Aunt Kathy when they were like 17, 18 years old, and they're still married today, and so he, around the time that Big Mac started the Crew of Mardi Gras, my Uncle Mac said, well, I'm starting my own crew too, and he started the Crew of Thor.
Yeah.
And so they had a really good thing going, I think, and it was like a little bit of a competitive spirit, you know, a father and son thing. If you go look at some of those photos in that slideshow, I think you'll just see like a lot of love, a lot of camaraderie at this time. I think in this time, in the late 70s, the early 80s, McKinley, Cantrell and Sons were building floats for like almost 30 crews.
Yeah.
In New Orleans and Metairie, and it was just, I think it was a really special time for our family, you know. Just now, I was born in 1982, so I was a little baby when they were like really in, you know,
Right,
living this
yeah.
up and in being that family, you know. And so, like, when I was a baby, like probably 4 years old, my mom was the Queen of Thor, and I was a little page, and I got to ride and stuff like that. And I think when I was a little bit older, my cousin, who was my age, was the Queen. Lindsay was the Queen of Thor, and Mackie was king that year. And so there's a cool picture that I have like here on the quote that I took from Tom Petty, and it's Mackie kind of riding, like, you know, with his hand, you know, he
Yeah.
and my Aunt Kathy, his mom, you know, she still kind of, she told me the other day, she's like, he threw his crown, you know, like, so he was having fun, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think eventually Big Mac got old, you know. He got old, and so the Crew of Mardi Gras stopped parading like in the mid '90s,
Right.
but I think leaving a pretty solid legacy. I mean, I have this older Arthur Hardy Mardi Gras guide. It's from like 1988, and in there, you know, he says like, Crew of Mardi Gras is the first crew that threw plastic cups off of the floats, you know. And so I think that's pretty cool. It's like, geez, I have all these cups. Thank you, Big Mac. You know, like this.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, but
Yeah, my daily drinkware is the one for
totally.
grandpa, or,
Still,
you know.
yeah. You know, especially when I'm pouring a drink for my kids, it's like you're drinking the plastic cup. You know. So and then I think another cool tidbit about Big Mac is like he really cared about details on the floats. So like back then they didn't have the floats were not as cool as they are today. I mean, if you go to
Didn't really have the technology,
They
but
didn't
the
have-
artistry I think was
yeah,
still there.
the artistry was
Yeah.
definitely still there. Like if you look at like these old giant, you know, like props
Mhm.
that are 20 feet tall in the front of these old king props and stuff that are falling apart these days and stuff, but they still might be sitting somewhere.
Yeah.
You can see it and that they really were doing big things. But like, but I think Big Mac cared about the lighting, you know. So I don't know if this is true or not, but like, but I want to say he might have been kind of instrumental in putting twinkling lights on the side of the float. So like having like these full size light bulbs, and at some point there were these ticker boxes, this little tiny like ticker machine, and it just boom. If once it was wired and the generator would go at night, you'd have all these colored light bulbs and they would twinkle like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And so there's that, but beyond that, he was a monster with the gold leaf. You know what gold leaf is?
Yes.
It's like this little foil paper.
Yeah.
And it's a pain in the butt to apply to a float because you have to, you know, you have to glue,
Yeah.
and then you take the gold leaf and you rip it off of the thing, and so by the end of it, your hands are full of
Just
this
disintegrates
weird
from nothing,
Yeah.
you know?
stuff. But so like if there was so let's say like a dull prop like a boat or a house or a skyscraper or something, Big Mac would have gold leaf like. And I think Mackie, because of that, Mackie did the same thing. He cared about the details of his props, you know. And at his funeral, when my uncle Mac spoke, he said, "My dad was a workaholic, and my son was a workaholic. I don't know what happened to me." You know, but yeah, it's, you know,
So-
yeah.
Yeah, so like besides Mardi Gras and Thor, did they captain any other parades?
They currently have the crew of Kings, and I want to say Kings started up within the past 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's new, and the idea was to build a bunch of pretty single deck floats to get away from the ginormous thing, and to go back to a well built, like kind of old school single decker float that was well done, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's what they did with the crew of Kings.
And they got me over my anxiety by having a parade in Harahan. It was kind of the first one post-COVID, you know.
Yeah.
So I was like, thank God, let's go, you know. But I think they'd ridden the year before that too. You know,
Yeah, there was like a
veterans.
year or two that they rolled on
Yeah.
veterans.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think they
it's-
just wanted a parade.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're going to keep the Harahan route, correct?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not sure because I know that like my uncle Mac always is like very supportive of Family Gras and the whole thing that they've done recently there. You know, with the concerts and stuff like that over by the reviewing stands and all.
Yeah.
I mean, he loves that, and so I'm not sure, you know, but
Well, I mean, when he rode it was not quite summer, but not quite Mardi Gras either, you know. So I don't know. He might have a second
yeah.
sliding in there, which would be fine by me, you know.
So let me ask you, when did you start writing the book? I mean, there's moments where it almost feels like you were writing it hand in hand with Mackie. You know what I mean? Like to where, you know, the detail and you know the memories of all these different stories. You know, it's almost like you had him there to where you were like, hey, didn't weren't you drinking a light beer that day, or you
Oh,
know what I
no.
mean? Like,
Straight whiskey.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, like what happened is that last year I was working at an advertising agency in Baton Rouge, and I lost my job. It was kind of mutual, but I don't want to go into it. But I
Yeah.
started a company. I said, I can do some of this work myself, and so I started a company to try to sell my services as a copywriter and this and that. And but my dream was to start a publishing company. So it was when I was working as a newspaper editor a few years back. I worked as the editor of the Gonzales Weekly Citizen, the Donaldsonville Chief, the Plaquemine Post South, from 2017 to 2020, and when I was living, I lived in Santa Ma, which is like this unincorporated community outside of Gonzales, and they have a big high school with a serious football team and everything. And I was kind of in love with Donaldsonville. It's an old Louisiana city, and I would just kind of daydream about like opening up a publishing company there, walking around, and so, but here I am. I have to do my job. I have to go interview this guy today and write this article and stuff. So when I had this opportunity, I thought like, well, I'm going to start a publishing company. And further, and I talked to Mackie about this too, but like before Mackie passed, I said, you know what, I'm going to start a publishing company. And he was like, I don't think there's a publishing company based in Louisiana anymore, And I was like, I did a little research, and there isn't. There was a Pelican Publishing.
Yes.
And I still think they have a branch or an arm here, But as far as like a big company, I feel like, I think a different company, Arcadia maybe it was called, Acacia, I don't know. Another company bought out Pelican, and so now Louisiana, which is ripe with books, is ripe with ideas for publishers.
Yeah.
Is kind of at a disadvantage, I think. And so I was like, well, maybe I will try to be that guy. So I was working on I finished this year a copy editing certification through New York University. And I was just trying to figure out, like, what's the best path to become a publisher, or to work for a publishing company even, And it was like, well, you have to be a good copy editor first. And so I was like, well, let me get certified. And so I finished that certification. And I had worked in the service industry for a long time, I've been working in the service industry off and on since I'm in high school. And I started writing a book about waiting tables last year. And then in December, the kids came home from school, and here I was, like, I was in book writing mode near the end of last year. I'd started writing a book about waiting tables, like a comedy or something, and then the holidays came, and the kids got off of school, and we went to Disney World, and then Christmas came, and then Mackie died. And so it had been 4 or 5 weeks since I'd touched the project that I had been working on, and I was sitting at home on the sofa, kind of listless and very depressed. And my wife came home from work, and she said, why don't you write a book about Mackie and call it The Mayor of Mardi Gras? And so I was like, because I don't think I can do that, I've been crying all day, Carrie, like that seems really impossible. And she sat down next to me, and she was like, and I just kind of thought about it, like, maybe this is a good opportunity to do something like that. And I love Mackie, like, it's somebody that I love. It's something that I love, and I think that might, you don't want to write about something that you're not in love with.
Right. Yeah.
Because you're gonna spend so much time with it. And so the thing about the mayor of Mardi Gras is that right after he died, we were hanging out at my Nana Paran's house, and we were talking about these old stories, like how Mackie's friends would come visit him at the float den, and everybody standing around hanging out would be like, "Oh, hey, it's the sheriff of Bucktown," or like, it's the mayor of Hog Alley, or like whatever else, like little like nook they could be, wherever they lived, they were the king of, and I think like, so I would like, I asked my little cousin Austin, I was like, man, so like, what you think Mackie would be? He'd be like, oh, Mackie was the mayor of Harahan, and I'm like, well, why is he the mayor? Like, Harahan has a mayor,
Right.
So that's a little different. There is no sheriff of Bucktown. There is a mayor of Harahan, though.
Yeah.
He's not him, but
Yeah,
but
we've
from
had a couple mayors of Fat City, and
There you go, yeah.
just like
Yeah.
those, yeah.
and I think I have an old friend from high school who's like the mayor of Metairie on Twitter. It's just like stop, but like, but so Mackie was a huge advocate for Harahan. So that's why like even if they keep the crew of kings there, it doesn't matter because Mackie loved Harahan.
Yeah.
It seems like a home that works in my opinion, but. If you had asked Mackie, like, what's the best hardware store in the city of New Orleans? He would
It
say,
wouldn't be Home
Ace
Depot. It wouldn't be
Hardware,
Lowe's.
Harahan.
Ace Hardware,
Yeah, it would be
Harahan,
Ace Harahan. Yeah.
What's the best po' boy in the city? Mackie said Red Wagon, and
Yeah.
Harahan, and chicken parmesan, and like, so we got to laughing about all those stories while we were kind of grieving, and so when Carrie, my wife, came home and she said, why don't you write a book? I call it The Mayor of Mardi Gras. And it made a lot of sense. It just made it, it was like I knew that was going to be the title before I started writing it, a word, And so I started writing it, I want to say probably a week or two after he was buried, And it was just like, it became like a labor of love. It became like an obsession, Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of a sleep in type of guy. If I can get away with it, I might sleep late, and I was getting up at like 3:30 in the morning to get to the computer. Like everybody's sleeping. I'm going to work on this thing, and I'd go sit down and I'd think about it, and I shed so many tears during the writing process of this thing. So there would be such like there was a lot of feeling. I wanted to convey that. Like I wanted. I as a writer, I always think like if I'm really laughing at something while I'm writing it, or laughing at something that I'm reading, that writer was probably laughing when he wrote it.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I think like human emotion is universal.
Mm-hmm.
Or like if this guy was really torn up about something, a relationship or whatever, and he's writing about it, and then I read it and I'm like, oh my god, it's so sad. Like I think that's the kind of the cool thing about writing, and so I really.
Did you feel like it was kind of therapeutic?
100%, man. I am so grateful for the opportunity that I had, because I took like 2 months to work on this project, and 2-3 months, and I got to grieve properly, I did. I'm still like, I don't think it goes away, I don't think that goes away, but like it does help. It did help me,
I was surprised how quickly you were able to do it, and I kind of understood then that it must have been one of those like I have to just finish it, but I don't know if he had told me you'd released it or I'd seen it somewhere that you released. I was like, well, that was fast to me because not being a family friend to me, it seemed like just last month he had passed away.
Yeah.
Was it a couple of months in between? I'm assuming, but it was pretty quick that you had it out.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I think a lot of people were on board with it. You know, in the family, you know, and a lot of people knew what I was doing, and I just did it. You know, I mean, my Mackie has an aunt Wanda, and she shared a lot of photographs with me, you know, and I called her up, and she had like old shoe boxes full of these fantastic photographs from the Cantrell floats heydays in the 80s and the 70s and stuff like that. And so I got to like tear through some of these, and you know, there was a lot of help. You know, I'd go visit the float den and talk to Mike Rowley or Renee Pierre, some of the guys that have been working there for quite some time, and everybody was willing to share. But for me, it wasn't just like Greg, because remember, like I wanted to start a publishing company, and I didn't know how to write a book, and I didn't know how to do this. So my wife was like, do it, and learn as much as you can about, you know, about publishing a book. And so every day was something new, man. Like I designed it, and you know what I mean? Like I designed every page. Like for instance, I think this is something that I'd love to talk about, because I've never gotten to say this before, but the design of the book is like, if you ever look at one of the old beat poets, City Light Publishing, like Howl by Allen Ginsberg, that's where I got the cover design. So like it's so basic. But
Seemed
if you
like a playbill with
it like it's
style,
simple,
you know?
right? And so I was just like, this is something that I can design myself. Howl is so timeless, and I was like, I'm just gonna make use of each space and tell everything that I need to say. And I have this beautiful image of Mackie that I put on the cover, and that was that. This is a Courier font, which is like the classic typewriter font. And so I made use of that. And then this font is called Phosphate, and it reminded me of like a Zulu font or something like that. It really kind of struck me as that. And so that was a no-brainer. And then like I outlined it in yellow because Mackie liked yellow. I felt like I couldn't go wrong with that. I felt like I had kind of the grace of Mackie.
You don't think you should like gold leaf around every edge?
Or the outside, like the Bibles will have the gold on the page.
Yeah. Maybe one day, you know.
It's like, no more work, please, none.
And what's the main difference between the hardback and the one that you have right now?
The hardback is all color, so like it's the same exact book, but all the illustrations
are in color. Yeah.
So the hardback costs twice as much to make and thus to sell. Mackie's longtime girlfriend, her name was Carrie as well. I always thought that was an interesting parallel, that like we both wound up with Carries. But she shared with me some photos that I used too of them here at the Chris Owens Easter Parade. And anyway, you know, in this picture of them this is at Atlas, I believe, and the reviewing stands on Causeway on Mardi Gras Day, you know. These are two of the last props that Mackie made. This is in the crew of Mad Hatters.
All right.
Which was like his baby,
Yeah.
you know, when he, you know.
Yeah, they built that entire parade that year, which is an incredible feat.
In his last year.
Is that Dr. John?
This is Dr. John, yeah. So, like, this is Dr. John, like, playing. This is Mackie's dad, and Mackie is a child. And this is at the Crew of Thor after party. And they got Dr. John to play, you know, for, like, nothing, you know, which is so cool to me, you know. You know, I I also have pictures of him. You know, I guess I can't leave out like Mackie being in the crew of Oak too. You know,
Yeah.
that was like his thing too. You know,
Yeah, that was one thing that was real cool with, you know, that a lot of the times, you know, float builders, they stay, I would say specifically to the float driven parades.
yeah,
But the fact that he also participated in Crew of Oak, and from a couple of the stories that you tell in the book, it seems like he was pretty darn instrumental in the decorating of the like the maple leaf and the after party, basically. You know.
yeah. A lot of there was a lot of business going through Mackie. You know, all like pro bono. But Mackie, can you do this for us this year? Do that? Of course I can. It was like his. It was like his joy. I mean,
Yeah.
What just shows that he's more of a, well, he's an actual fan of Mardi Gras, not just a businessman trying to sell a float, you know. So
100%.
it's obvious,
Yeah.
you know.
And I think like, yeah, I'm so glad you said that. First of all, I appreciate you saying that. But like, you know, when I published the paperback first, and then I thought like a few months later, like if I can redo this and maybe sell like a little bit more of a collectible book, I would
Yeah.
like to. And so then I got motivated to put together the hardback. So when the hardback was finished, I signed a copy and I mailed it to Arthur Hardy, and he emailed me back and he said, "We lost a good man," you know. And I think it was a good man in the sense that he loved Mardi Gras, just like you said. He wasn't just a business guy. It was like it was. I hate saying this like because I feel like it's so like Los Angeles to say like work hard, play hard, you know. But it was like, I mean, it was like the life of Mackie, you know. It was. I don't know. He lived Mardi Gras more so than I ever could. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I mean Mardi Gras, for you know, in a way, chewed me up and spit me out. You know, I would say,
It
but
does
like,
that.
you know, because it's
That's
so.
the beauty of it.
Yeah, like, because it's hard. Like, you know, you're only supposed to celebrate this for 2 weeks, but our family is building floats year
Right.
round. We're Mardi Gras-ing every day, and it weighs on, you know, it weighs on you a little bit.
I mean, we're fairly eyeballs deep, and but we're not building floats all day
Right,
too. That
yeah.
would be really
Yeah.
kind of half
Like-
intense.
To put it in reference, usually after the last parade of Mardi Gras, when I come over here, I usually have a shit-eating grin on my face because the looks on their faces.
We are
they
done.
they're spent, burned out, holes in their shoes. They just look like they pretty much got ran over by a stampede. Meanwhile, me, I feel like $1 million. You know?
Well, we were like last year we hit 54 parades.
52, I think.
52. I mean, that's like all of them.
Yeah.
Much, or all that you can get to
Well-
that don't overlap to each other.
To one of this parade.
Yeah.
To one.
Yeah.
Well, you know, like you were saying, it is a full time, you know, a year long thing. You know, with like float builders,
No, it's
costume
captaining
designers.
parades.
You know,
That's
being
it.
a captain, being captains of parades. You know, I mean, whereas we can sit back and relax for, you know, 6 months per se, until new news is starting to come out about parades. You know, from our respect. You know, but with them, it's like, you know, take a 2-day break, and then you know, on Thursday morning, show up over by the den. We need to tear down all these floats and start getting them ready because, you know, not only with Mardi Gras, you know, I'd have to assume that a lot of the floats with that you know, Mackie and his father and, you know, his grandfather before that are making, I'm sure also get used in, you know,
St. Patrick's
St.
Day.
Patrick's Day parades,
St. Patrick's.
Easter, you know.
Yeah,
I
Chris
mean,
Owen's little Easter parade they did in the French Quarter, and the St. Joseph's parade in the French Quarter, Irish Italian parade,
Yeah.
St. Patrick's parade, and those are coming up soon. Mackie would take like 2 weeks after Mardi Gras, and it was, you know, and he would go with his crew of Oak buddies to Breckenridge and go snowboarding. That was his thing, and he asked me to go, and I regret never going. I feel like I break an ankle or something.
I break my whole body.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I wouldn't even have to get onto the snowboard to get injured, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I in the book, I tried to use the I don't know if you picked up on this, but like the traditional kind of hero's journey
Yeah.
to kind of tell the story of Mackie a little bit, and I talk about how he kind of ran from this destiny, you know, of working in Mardi Gras for his career. You know, when he got out of high school, he went to Brother Martin. When he got out of high school, he went to Southeastern and studied studio art for like, I don't know, a year, and then took off to go work on the slopes in Colorado. You know, and after a couple of years there, he got into some trouble and he had to move home. And I think that's like a kind of a traditional like deal with like any hero, you
Yeah.
know, like you know you have to do this thing, but you're scared to do this thing, so you run from it for a little while, and then somebody like a mentor or something kind of tells you, look, this is
This is
gonna
your
be
destiny,
okay. This is
you
what
know?
you have to do.
Yeah.
And so I think like for him, just within a few years of moving back, you know, he had his daughter. You know, he has his daughter Mia, and Mia is a student at LSU. You know, and you know she's wonderful. But I think he really had to tighten up to, like, you know, to figure out what he was going to do about having a daughter.
Yeah.
Because float builders are a different breed of people, honestly. It's almost like, and I say this in the best possible way, but it's kind of like a circus. You know, like they're this little family of crazies that.
Like a sideshow attraction.
Yeah, it almost is. Like, I don't know what it is. It's just maybe the deep artist mentality where they're doing something sort of on their own so much that, I don't know, there's a thing about them. I've known a handful of them, and there's.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
I do. I totally
Yeah.
understand what you're saying.
It's hard to say that and sound
Yeah.
like I'm not trying to make fun of it.
No, not as an
but yeah,
insult, but as
yeah.
No.
just an observation.
Because what comes to mind immediately is like you have no idea like how the tractor situation works. You know, like during Mardi Gras to corral 30 guys for each parade to drive the tractors. You know, guys that you have to trust and guys that you know are coming in and out and they need to be, you know, and where we're going next, and then they have to drive the floats all the way across the city. I mean, the floats. I mean, they take them by tractor from Kenner all the way to Clearview, you know, or wherever else they're going here and there. But that's a circus.
Oh yeah.
That's a circus. I was like, hey, you need to be here right now to be, you know, on cue. Boom.
Like the air traffic control.
Yeah,
Almost. from
totally.
Floats.
And it takes a commanding kind of presence to handle that.
As far as the hero aspect of it, do you think he ever had a moment like "Help us, Obi-Wan, you're our only hope" type thing? There was that one defining moment where there's no turning back, and he had to keep going.
No, you know, I didn't like. I left it a little bit more loosely ended than that. I just kind of hinted at maybe it was the birth of his daughter, you know, to snap him into place. You know, maybe it was the death of his grandpa, you know, those sorts of things, and kind of coming to terms to understand, because, you know, there were times I think when he just wasn't sure of it and he didn't know, and so he went to school to learn how to weld for a while, and he worked like offshore, and he worked on the riverfront for a period of time in his early 20s and stuff before he made the commitment to work on the floats full time. He did all this stuff, but what was happening at that time, and I think this is what they miss a lot now with him, is that like he could build a whole float by himself from the, because the trailers come in for the floats and they really need to be customized.
Yeah.
And Mackie could weld those rings, to start from ground up, and now they have to hire out, somebody else that, but Mackie had that stuff sort of under control. I remember sitting there for hours, just sitting there smoking a cigarette, watching him weld, float and stuff, just being like kind of, please don't burn yourself, Mac, but yeah, he picked up a lot of, I kind of mentioned this in the book, that he just kind of was a jack of all trades at a certain point, because he picked up so many skills. He could wire a float for electricity, and in code.
Mardi Gras code.
Well,
Mardi Gras code.
Mardi Gras code. I don't know what.
right, yeah.
Mardi Gras code's not exactly code, but it's code. It's a code.
But no, he took it seriously. I know that much, and he did. His buddy was an electrician and kind of showed him this and that, but I mean, he took pride in all
He
that.
didn't have YouTube at the time.
Dude, there was no. Well, actually, there was YouTube at the time. I mean, there was YouTube in the late 2000s.
Yeah, but I don't think that there's YouTube videos out there.
How to wire a float.
How to wire a float.
Yeah.
How to wire a very flammable float with a
How
generator.
to cloud a Mardi Gras float. There's not a YouTube video about that. A lot of that's either learning on job or learning from an expert or
How to wire
an experienced person. Like
Right.
your Uncle Mac or even his grandfather, the different designers and artists that work at Cantrell, and I mean,
There isn't how to wire a Mardi Gras float for dummies.
no.
The funny thing to me, and I've known this firsthand, I don't know who the float builder was, but like you were saying with the paint, where eventually you could just put your hand through the cotton, the same happens to the wiring. So like the shielding will come off there, and you lean over to somebody and you get yourself a zap.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
I don't doubt that for a second.
I've like tied cups over a piece of wire before. It happens.
So if I go back to like what you were saying, it was a bit of a psychosis, I would say, like a me being up at 4 a.m, grieving, writing these stories down, and then so there were these parts where I'm writing and I mention them in italics, in the book, where I feel like Mackie kind of touched the text,
Yeah.
and where I like had a question or I could hear him saying something to me in the back of my head, and so I would make sure that I included that in italics just to let everybody know that Mackie was there, at that time. And I don't think anybody expected it to be. I don't know what anybody expected of it. If it's not a stuffy book,
No.
it's something.
Very easy read.
Yeah, it's
Very-
a fun, easy read. I
Yeah.
mean, before the show, I was telling you, I'm the type of guy that, not because I'm dumb, but because usually books can't really grab my attention for long term. Like Cat in the Hat is like a 2-day book for me. Whereas your book, I couldn't put it down. Like, I was staying up until like 2:33 in the morning, sitting in my bed,
Aw.
and
Yeah.
kept on reading. And, like I said, after reading the book, while I didn't know him personally, I felt like we grew up the whole, I feel like, if I would have walked into his house, he would have been like, "Hey, what's going?" You really do tell the story behind him very well.
Yeah, thanks, man. There was one review that I got, and I actually included it on the back of the hardcover book, and this was the first kind of feedback that I got on the book, and it was Mackie's Aunt Wanda she sent me a long text message when she got the book. She said she just stopped everything and she stood there in the kitchen and read it until she was finished. And she wrote me this text in a text message. She said, Greg, I just finished the book and just want to say thanks, and I absolutely loved it. And then she wrote, I laughed and cried through the whole book. I cried so hard at times I couldn't even see what I was reading. I had to stop a moment. I had quite a few of those moments. I couldn't put it down. I don't think there's a word perfect enough to describe how I felt about reading things about my nephew Mackie. Felt like he was sitting next to me the entire time. Just incredible. And I asked Wanda to leave that as an Amazon review. Can you post that on Amazon? She was like, I will. So then, but that, I was like, well, geez, the first review of the book, I couldn't have, there will be no better review than that. So I was like, that's great.
Well, you mentioned Amazon. I know, I got mine from Amazon initially.
I got mine from Amazon.
Hey.
But I know also you're in several of the local bookstores and the libraries and
Yeah, what I did was I made a press release after a couple months, and I mailed like 20 copies of the book out to every bookstore in New Orleans, and I didn't keep one of these, but I made them specially with like an extra page of an extra picture of Mackie, where he had dropped his keys in a paint bucket, and my cousin Austin was laughing at him, and he picked him up, and he had him up against the wall like this, and with the paint dripping off the keys in his hand, and Austin cracking up laughing, and I took that picture, and I made an extra page in the paperback to the and I sent it to all the press too, the Advocate, and this is for heroic journalists and bookshop owners, in this picture of Mackie, and this is a promotional copy. Do what you will with it, but enjoy it, and so the bookshop on Oak Street, they gave me some really nice feedback immediately, and then Garden District Books has been they asked me to come in and sign the books, and I wanted to go there before I came in today, just to go visit, because it was so nice. That email was so nice, but they closed at 6 and it was just too late. I didn't make it in, but then I sent a copy of the book to Arthur Hardy, like I mentioned, and then I sent I told Barnes and Noble small press department, like, hey, this is all happening. The library, the library's having a book signing for me, and that just came about from me walking in the library and saying, hey, what do I have to do to donate this book to the library? And then a few weeks later, they asked me if I wanted to do a book signing, and I said, heck yeah. So I sent an email to Barnes and Noble small press department, and then within the past month or so, I found out that they were stocking the book on the shelves in the Louisiana locations.
Yeah.
And I went to the Barnes and Noble in Baton Rouge, and I took a picture with it on the shelf and stuff like that. And it was a magical day, man. It really was. Like, I couldn't tell you, like, how awesome that felt, accurately,
Yeah. But I mean, it's really cool to be able to tell your story of someone that you cared about so much, to where internationally it can be purchased now.
Yeah, man. I've actually published another book.
I was about to mention that as well.
This book came out today, actually. Well, Amazon picked it up today first, and they always pick everything up first. If you go to bookshop.org, you can actually purchase books online through your favorite local retailer.
Really?
Which is pretty cool, man. And so, bookshop.org. It's a pretty cool little deal they got too. And so, I know the local bookshops appreciate that plug.
Yeah.
But this book is has a little something about voodoo. You know, it's called Dream of Writing, and it's a screenplay that I started writing in college, and over the past 4 months or so, I decided to pick it up and finish it, and really put my heart into it. And Mackie is actually a character in this book. So like, there's a character of Cousin Mackie. He's the cousin and co-worker of the main character of the story, who is he's having nightmares, recurring nightmares, and so he's turning to voodoo in the French Quarter to kind of solve his problems. And so I did a bunch of reading about voodoo and stuff like that because I didn't want to misappropriate. And I learned that voodoo is a deal where you're praying to your ancestors a lot. Like, just like we're sitting here, like, if we were practitioners of voodoo, I think Mackie's sitting here. You know what I mean? All of your ancestors, everyone is sitting here with us, like they live with you. I mean, you can talk to them and you can communicate with them and stuff like that. And so, I learned that, and today on my way in, I said, Mackie, just give me the right words to say tonight, man. Just help me to get in, to remember the stories and to be able to do it without crying, and so I drove to my old place in Bucktown and went and looked at the book for a minute on the shelf at Barnes and Noble, and just kind of tried to get my head right before I came over, and so nowadays I do, and I'll say a prayer to Mackie every now and then, and I know that that's happening, so it's all gravy.
He's again, he really seemed like a genuine dude, and I'm upset that I didn't get to know him while he was here with us on Earth, and I can only imagine the lessons that he taught you through life, and the impact that he had on you, and it clearly shows in the book.
Yeah, there's with Mackie, I think he worked all the time. So he worked at the den, and then he would go back to his house in Harahan. Boom, 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 and so you knew where he was all the time, but I think since he worked so hard and stuff, and look, he was in love with his girlfriend, and I'm sure that they were on track to becoming husband and wife one day, and so he was busy, and I think a lot of people appreciated what I said about him, because even though like they didn't maybe necessarily get to spend that year that I spent with him working at the den full time, they knew that he was just a fun person, that he was a cool guy, like you said, I mean, it's just something like about him that was just like it was.
I probably met him 3 times over the years.
A little bit of an enigma, man. A little bit of an enigma. Like a little bit of I don't want to say recluse, but like a little bit of a recluse. Like he cared deeply about everyone, but about the people that were around him, and he was always surrounded by a group of people, and so there are guys that worked at the float den, and those guys that worked with him every day would come back to the house after work, and I keep like pointing over here, like I'm pointing to Harahan.
Yeah,
it's that way.
The float den, Harahan, and they would come back to his house, and he would cook dinner for them and hang out and drink with them and watch reality TV, and like and that was like a routine. It was a routine, and but but everyone else like didn't get to, who didn't get that, I think liked to hear maybe what he was like to be around him. I mean,
Yeah.
if you didn't have any business or didn't need to go to the float den for anything, you wouldn't have got to know him really.
Right.
But if you did, you were kind of lucky because he was special. I think he got that from his grandpa too. And first of all, his dad is lovely. He is just just funny, and loving and helpful. And his grandfather was the same way. And his grandfather, guys would come to the float den when I worked there, and I saw the most unusual culprit just shedding a tear because he missed Mackie's grandfather one day at the float den. Just random tear, I miss that man, because he cared about all the guys that worked for him, and it was, I think that's like a true carnival story, true spirit of things, it's like, and the Cantrells today, they did 12 parades, I feel like, last year. I brought the list out. I don't know if it matters, but Omega, Mad Hatters, Atlas, Nemesis, Nix, St. Patrick's, Irish Italian, King, St. Joseph, Chris Owens, and Little Rascals, and they're still working at it, and we'll see,
I was wondering, so did anybody in the family take it over, or is it just going to keep going?
Oh, it's still. It's still Cantrell floats. It's still, my Uncle Mac. That's his thing.
Okay.
And it's still there. I don't know. I can't speak on the future too far down the road, but for now, we still have a really good thing going there with him. So,
Where can people follow, your publishing company and
sure,
all your books? Is
the books are pretty available, Googleable. You can Google the Mayor of Mardi Gras, and soon you'll be able to Google Dream of Writing. But if you want to follow me, it's my website is Make It Right, MAKEITWRITE .studio. That's my website, and then I have a LinkedIn page for the company, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Gregory L. Fischer for Twitter. Instagram is at MakeItRight.studio, same as the website. Thank you. Devin. Yeah.
That's what I'm here for.
He doesn't just deliver water.
It's a free agent.
Also, if your bookstore doesn't have it, request it.
Yeah, you can order it. Any local bookstore will order a book for you if you. They can do that. It's distributed through Ingram, which is a huge book distributor. So,
Greg, I really appreciate you coming and giving us this opportunity to hear some of the stories behind, the legend, shall we say, the mayor himself. And if you haven't read the book, I'd strongly recommend to you, go out to your local bookstore, go to Amazon, go, to Barnes and Noble, and buy, go to the library, check it out, read the book. It's a great read. I read it in 2 days' time, and I'm usually not a big reader, so it's an entertaining book. Thank you again so much. Signing out. We'll see you on the route.